Hey everyone, you're listening to Births at Home, the podcast hosted by me, Esmeralda, the Homebirth Doula. And today we are having a very special guest on because she was my doula for my births. And I also attended her most recent birth as well and took some pictures of that. So I have a little bit of insight on that birth, but she will be telling us about all of her birth experiences a little bit, and most importantly, her home birth stories. So grab a coffee and come listen on and sit with us, and let's enjoy the stories. If you just want to start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, that way all of our listeners can know who you are.
All right. So my name is Jessica, and I'm from the Chicago suburbs. And currently, I'm a student midwife, but I've been a doula and birth keeper since 2019, and I'm placenta encapsulated certified, and I do placenta keepsakes, and I'm a lactation counselor. Um, and all the birthy things. So, and I've been doing birth work since 2019, like I said. And yeah, so now I'm in midwifery school and I'm a second year now. So I have about a year, maybe a year and a half left. Um, and yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Awesome. You're just doing everything right now, aren't you?
Mom of three. Just doing all the things mom and midwife right now.
That's awesome. So how did you get into the whole home birth world? What kind of kick started it for you?
I think so in early 2019, my first daughter, my firstborn, she was 1.5. So, it took about that long for me to figure out what being a doula was and the whole natural aspect of birth because her birth was very medicalized. Um, she was born in 2017, so, I was pretty much straight out of high school. I was a year and a half out, and I didn't know much about anything. And I just knew that the way my mom and my grandma gave birth was epidural, on your back, all the things like hire an OB, go to your local OB, like that's it. Don't scout anyone, just, a doctor is a doctor.
Mhm.
They're gonna do what's best for you, right? Um, so that's how her birth kind of was. And then in 2019, I met a doula from Arizona. Um, and we became kind of close friends over Instagram and social media and everything. And she was becoming a doula, and she was like, "Hey, like this is who I'm going to certify with, and all the things." And at that time, I was in nursing school to be a labor and delivery nurse.
Mhm.
So I started figuring out both that nursing wasn't for me and that I had like late onset birth trauma at the same time. And I was like, I don't think that I can support women in this way when I'm realizing that that didn't suit me or serve me and could have been really bad, like,
Yeah.
really quickly. Like, I was very close to, being C-sectioned, and, um, so I think those worlds, like my personal and my birth and my professional life, like, all kind of collided, and I was like, "I think I'm gonna go be a birth doula, and I think I'm gonna drop out of nursing school." And my dad was like, "Are you" and then he just, like, handed me all the money I
Mhm.
needed for Christmas, um, and for to be a doula, and I got triple certified to do, births and placentas and lactation, and I got, like, my bloodborne pathogen and everything, and I got all my ducks in a row, and I was like, "I think I'm just gonna do it, like, I think I'm just gonna start doing it." And
Mhm.
everyone was like, "Alright." Like, they didn't know what that was, like, what I was doing, had no, like, sort of hope, like, at that point in time, everyone was like, "What's a doula? Like, who
Mhm.
are they and why?" Like, everyone was, like, giving me side eye, like, "Okay, whatever, like, she's gonna do what she's gonna do," but, so that's how that kind of started.
Mhm.
And then fast forward a few months and COVID hit, and that was kind of like this catastrophic boom in the home birth industry, and, uh, right away, literally right away. So my sister-in-law was pregnant, and I had a friend from high school, and then you.
Mhm.
And, all these people were, like, getting pregnant around me, and then, they were like, "Hey, can you support my birth?" And I was like, "Yeah." Like, our
Mhm.
certifying body didn't require births like some of the other programs do, but, because I was still, like, I was still becoming a doula, and I did finish before, I served anyone, but, so yeah, I just started, like, right off the bat serving home births, and, I did do some hospital births, but the home births were really, monumental and, like, life-changing, and then I saw, like, the way that we can birth. And then I got pregnant, and I started preparing for my own birth, and, so that was with my 2nd baby, and I was preparing for an unassisted birth, and at that time, I was really radical, and I was very, like, I don't trust the hospital, I don't trust doctors, you know, F the medical industry type of
Mhm.
I was very, very, very deep in the crunchy mom hole, which is a fine place to be. Um, but so yeah, and I just really yeah, I learned to trust birth and look at birth from such a different perspective than what I grew up and how I gave birth the first time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I love your story. That's so, like, how everything just kind of connected with your personal world and then your career
Yeah,
world and everything, and it kind of healed your own birth in a
definitely,
sense as well. Um,
definitely.
and so with your unassisted birth, how did that go? If you kind of want to tell us, like, when labor started or whatever you want to say from that home birth story.
So, yeah, um, that birth was really so I hadn't had a C-section with my first baby. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I was very close. So I did achieve a vaginal birth, and so I felt comfortable. Um, Not that I wouldn't if I had had a C-section because VBACs are, what we know about VBACs now versus back then are so different. But
Mhm.
I felt comfortable, like, I had a very aside from the induction portion of my birth, I didn't hemorrhage, I didn't tear, I didn't have any serious complications or, postpartum physical healing was, perfect, it was fine. So I was like, "You know what? I'm not in a place where I can give birth comfortably in a hospital, so I'm gonna just pour my all while I'm already pouring my all into birth work, I'm gonna do it for myself." And so with my insurance, I got free prenatal care with a local hospital. It was actually Rush. And shout out the Rush midwives because I actually love them and their care was great. They didn't know I was free birthing though. Um, but after the fact, they were like, yeah, we kind of figured, like, you're amazing, whatever, whatever. So um I got the free prenatal care. I did all of my, like, I did the glucose test, which was but they let me do, like, the alternative with the grape juice. Like, they were very accommodating. Um, I did do my ultrasound, my 20-week anatomy scan just because I knew my plans and I wanted to make sure that I was in, a good place physically to give birth at home unassisted. So, like, my placenta was perfect, baby was, growing on time, all the different things. I had my labs done. I still got pretty much the normal prenatal care, and I did have a fetal monitor. Um, so just having the prenatal care and the fetal monitor alone and knowing that I was in a good place, that was so important for me because birth is so mental. And someone who has anxiety like me, like, I can get really, off the wire. Like, "Oh my gosh, this is gonna go wrong if I don't know exactly what's going on behind the scenes." So that really helped the mental portion for me. And then when it came time to his birth, I was really trying not to go into labor because I had to wait for you to go into labor
Yes.
because we were due around the same time and you were my last client and we achieved that, go us.
Mhm.
So you went into labor and literally your whole labor, which wasn't even long at that time, but I was just contracting and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, stop it. Stop doing that. But it was so because, the oxytocin, and I feel like even when I'm not pregnant and I step into a birth, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I remember this." Like, this low, like, belly pain because of all the love and oxytocin flowing in that room, but, so I attended your birth, and then, I think it was, like, a day or 2 later, after I was done with your placenta, so I did your placenta,
Mhm.
and I think I dropped everything off, and I literally went home, and that night I started contracting, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, okay." And that was, like when was Emery born? March 24th?
22nd.
22nd. Okay, so then
Mhm.
I went into labor. I'll call it labor for now because it was not, but I went into labor at, like, I think it was the 24th, 25th, like, because I waited till the morning to be like, "Okay, this is still going," like,
Yeah.
and the only thing I was unsure of was my natural labor timeline because with my first, it was an induction. So I knew that
Mhm.
I had already been having these contractions with my first for like an overnight period of time. And by the morning came, I went to the hospital, but they ended up inducing me to get things to go quicker. So I knew that my body was probably going to take a longer time laboring like it had, and that,
Mm.
without the medication, I kind of had to do do things, on my own to keep the oxytocin flowing. So at that time, I was really big on pushing, like, all the oxytocin things, like, so once labor had gone through overnight, I was like, "Okay, it's still going, it's not stopping, but it's also not picking up," and I was starting to get pretty, like, "Hello, like, when
Mhm.
are things gonna happen?" And honestly, it had really only been, like, 12 hours, and it wasn't active labor, it was very early, but consistent, so I was like, "These are happening every 5 to 8 minutes." This is
Mhm.
like when you would go to the hospital, right? Like,
Yeah.
tell you to come in, like, when they're every 5 minutes for 1 minute, So, that had happened, and I was kinda just waiting, and then things did start to pick up when I was doing, like, I think I tried pumping and, clary sage and all the different, like I said, oxytocin stimulators. And so we went to my mom's because that's where I was birthing, because she has, like, a nice house and her basement was really nice, and I just envisioned my birth there. And it was a great place, and I gave birth there twice now. But, so, um, that happened, and we get to my mom's, and labor totally stopped. And I was like, "Okay, maybe it's just, the environment and what I know about people being in your space, uh, when you're laboring." So we get to my mom's and my labor totally stalled and stopped, and at that point, it was, like, the 26th. And I tried again, like, the different things, I tried to, like, pick it back up because they were coming and going at that point, like, every 30 minutes. Like, so it
Mhm.
wasn't like they completely stopped, but, like, the flow of it had stopped. And, I kinda told Eric, like, "I don't know what's happening?" So then I started doing, like, Miles circuit, like, okay, maybe baby's in a bad position or, malpositioned, which was the case, now that
Mhm.
I know after the fact, but
Mhm.
so I did try all of those things, and when I did those things, it did help, um, but just days went on where I was just laboring on and off, and I think it was a total of, like, 11 days.
Mhm.
He was born the 5th, so can't do math that quick, but it was about 11 days of prodromal labor, and then finally on the 4th, um, I just remember being like, "Okay, this is it," and everyone was like, "Are you sure?" Because, it had been almost 2 weeks of this, and Eric had taken off work already, like, in the beginning stage, so then he went back to work, I
Oh.
think the 9th, and he
Mhm.
was like, "I'm gonna go back to work just to save some of these days," and then he went to work the 9th and then went to work the 10th, and I told him on the 10th, I'm like, "Hey, you need to come home now," and he was like, "I just, like, I just got here." And I was like, "No, this is real, like, this is actually real," and, everyone was at that point, everyone was like, "We don't know, like,
Mhm.
what's going on?" But it was real, and in the morning, I was still kind of, like, on the cusp of, like, early labor and active labor, and they were coming quick, but the intensity wasn't that bad. And then he got home and that definitely helped. I think just like being with him and like feeling him and like, I felt safe. And then
Mhm.
nightfall came and then it really picked up because we know melatonin kind of pushes oxytocin to kick up the notches a little. So I think it was like 9 p.m. and I was like, I think I need to fill the tub. And we filled the tub and I think it was about 10 o'clock maybe I got in the tub. Um, and they still weren't that intense. And now that I know from my second home birth, when I get in the tub, my labor dissipates and I can totally like drift off into this sleep world because it's happened both times now. So the second my first home birth, the second time, I get in the tub and things kind of slow again, but the intensity is picking up this time. So I'm like, what is going on? Um, and my sister-in-law, she wanted to come to my birth and she's a doula and a birth photographer anyway. So I call her and she's already on her way home from like Michigan. And so instead of going home, she just came to my house. So she gets there at like 1 o'clock in the morning maybe, and I'm just in the tub, and I get out of the tub a few times, and, we fill it with hot water again. But when she called me and she was on the way, she's like, "I don't know. Are you sure you're in labor?" And I was like, "I'm in the tub. Like, what do you mean am I in labor?" And she's like, "You're just talking so normal." And that's what that birth was so like, just like that for that
Mhm.
whole labor process, except for the end where I was like, "Okay, this is her," like, transition is like, we don't know her. We don't
Yeah.
know the transition beast when she comes out, but, just that whole labor was very, like, flowy, like, I felt like I was just flowing through it so peacefully, um, and nobody believed that I was in labor until literally I was crowning, like, um so she got there and she took some pictures, and then I had fetal ejection reflex kick in at about 3 in the morning. And I was like, okay, this is it. Like, I feel it. And one of the things, so I had attended my sister in law's birth as well. And one of the things that really helped her was me telling her to bear down, not resist the urges, and all of those types of things. So she really did that for me. And that was really grounding. And so I just remember hearing her voice like, follow your instincts, like if
Mhm.
you feel like you have to push, don't pull away from it. And she really coached me mentally, and that really helped. Except for with the fetal ejection reflex being kicked in and him being malpositioned, he was still so high up in my pelvis, and in the stations. And so I had to push him down for so long because he was just so high up still. And I did have that feeling, that I needed to push, like I could not
Mhm.
stop that. But that caused me to have a cervical lip because I was pushing for so long, and it
Mhm.
felt like if anyone listening has ever had a cervical lip, you know that it literally feels like you're pushing against a brick wall. Like your pelvic floor is so tense and so just like swollen and inflamed, and you don't really know at that time what's going on because you're literally giving birth. And like that labor land type of mentality is just, you don't really know at that time.
Mhm.
So that was a huge obstacle, and I was really traumatized by that after the fact. Because the internal pain from a cervical lip is excruciating. Like it literally feels like your whole pelvic girdle is just on fire.
Ah.
Um, but yeah, so I pushed and I pushed, and at one point, I think my mom had said like, "Are you okay? Like, are you sure you don't?" And I was like, "Don't even say it. Don't say it. Not say it because I'm in such a good space and I feel fine." And they had known that I was pushing for so long, but honestly, at that time, I didn't. I thought
Mhm.
it had been like 20 minutes. 'Cause, like, when transition takes over, you're, like, out of body.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm fine," like, "I'm good."
Mhm.
And I could kind of feel his head, like, I just knew that I needed to push him down, and that
Mhm.
was really hard, but, so 5:30 came and he was born, and, after, like, 2.5 hours of being in, fetal ejection reflex and pushing and all the different things, and, um, so then after the fact I have never experienced a birth high like that. That was insane. Um, and it just was totally like life changing. And I was like, oh my God, this is why people give birth at home. Like, holy crap.
Mhm.
um, and so yeah, that was part of his, but I will say that everyone, um, everyone looks at home birth like, oh, it's so peaceful, and this is the way, that we're made to give birth, and everything will be so great. But like, you can still have a good birth and still be kind of traumatized by the experience because I remember being out of that birth high. I
Mhm.
was like, I don't know if I could ever do this again. Like, that was
Mhm.
really hard and that was really painful. Not even like the birth aspect of it, but like the postpartum from the cervical lip and all the things
Mhm.
with that. But that was that experience, and then I did have another baby, just 6 months ago, and that was a totally different experience. So, um, all my different births are so different in so many ways, but my second birth and my first home birth was definitely the hardest.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I always love hearing you tell that story, because I know we were so close in
Yeah.
like our due dates. I think they were 2 days apart, our due
Yeah.
date.
Our original due dates, yeah, were 2 days apart.
Yeah. So it's always so crazy to just be like, it worked out where you were able to attend my birth and then your labor kind of kicked in, but it didn't happen until like
I
2 weeks
know.
after.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, I always give you like a round of applause for that.
Yeah, that was really hard. Um, but I think it's really funny too going off that because, I've attended 2 of your births, and I remember telling you the second time, like, "I've attended both of your births pregnant,"
Hmm.
and that's how I told you that I was pregnant that second
Yeah.
time. Um, so it's just funny that that happened. It was
Hmm.
that was a crazy time.
Yeah. When I got your text, I was like, wait, what does she mean both of my births she's been pregnant? I don't get
I
it.
know.
And then it clicked and I'm like,
'Cause the
oh, she's
first
pregnant.
Yeah, 'cause the first one was like, I was very pregnant. I was like
Hmm.
39 and some days pregnant. And then the second one, I had just found out because yeah, you gave birth, what, 11/21?
21. Hmm.
Mhm, the day before Ava's birthday, and I think I found out, like, the 28th, and then, I wasn't really telling anyone at first, and then I think I hard launched, like, the next day, um but I was like, "Oh my gosh," I had just attended your birth, and I think I was still riding the birth high for, like, a week
Hmm.
later, and, I was like, "Gosh, I have to tell her I was pregnant that time." But, yeah, that was crazy.
And so with your next birth, did you know you wanted to give birth at home already again, or did you kind of
Yes.
double think about it?
I knew I wanted to give birth at home again, like, I think the thing about I won't say low grade, but, like, minimal trauma, like, it wasn't the home birth I had with Leo, which was
Mhm.
my first home birth, it wasn't traumatizing in the way where, like at the time, I was like, "I never wanna have kids again." Like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, like, but after that, I was like, "Okay, that was really hard. Here's what I know now, and here's what I would do different." And, in birth work, we kinda learn as we go, right? So, I knew right from the beginning of that very first positive test with my third that I needed support in a different way. I needed someone who knew the things that I knew,
Mhm.
who could have spotted the things that I knew after the fact. And so right away, I just had this huge pull and huge like intuition calling that I needed to hire a midwife.
Mhm.
And I was already in midwifery school. So, I've never been like anti midwife. I was very anti hospital for a little bit and like not very, pleased with OBs and like the medical system, but I was never anti midwife. I had prenatal care with the midwives in a hospital over here. Um, but at the time with Leo and planning for his unassisted birth, a huge barrier for us was financial. So that's why I kind of went the unassisted route with him. This time around, we were in a place where I could financially, make it work to hire a midwife. And so right away, I texted one of my midwives, Shelly, and I was like, "Hey, how do I, get care?" And she was like, "Oh my gosh, like email Isabel." And so I emailed and I got a consult, and we had an appointment and everything. And so yeah, right away, I just knew that I needed that type of care. So I had my consult or my consult appointment, and then um I lost my grandma like 2 weeks later, and amidst being at the hospital with her, I started bleeding, and I was really like, "No, this isn't happening," like right away we
Mhm.
want to think like we're losing the baby, miscarriage. And now from midwifery school, I actually learned that that's actually like a very small portion of people who bleed are actually having a miscarriage. Like it could be a threatened miscarriage, but it's not
Mhm.
always a for sure sign. So I just started panicking even more because I was like
Mhm.
losing my grandma. I didn't want to lose this baby because honestly, it wasn't a planned pregnancy. But then I'm someone who, like, when I'm pregnant, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm carrying life.
Mhm.
Um, and so I went home from the hospital and it was nighttime already. And I texted Isabel and I was like, hey, like, I think I'm having a miscarriage. And she was so, so, so like, oh no, don't even, like, don't
Mhm.
worry about it. Like, how much are you bleeding? What does it look like? Kind of assessing things from a text point of view. And
Mhm.
I was just telling her, and I was like, no, like, it's dark brown. It's kind of a lot. She's like, are there clots? I was like, no. And she's like, okay, how about this? How about you come in the morning? I'll go to the office. She was very accommodating and very, I want to say careful. Like, she was very caring and like
Mhm.
very careful with her words and, like, very intentional, and it was just so I just felt so wrapped, like, in her embrace, like, in her love, like, no matter what it was that whether it was an abortion or, like, a spontaneous abortion
Mhm.
um, or it wasn't, like, she was gonna care for me, and I was like, "Holy crap," like,
Mhm.
that was another very, moving time in that pregnancy. So, I went the next morning and she did labs for me. We did a few other tests, and she has like this cool fetal monitor ultrasound thing, and it hooked up to her phone, and it was an ultrasound thing. And she's like, normally I don't do this, but I don't think it's a spontaneous abortion, and let's just see if we can find something, if we can still see the sac, if we can, maybe possibly by chance find a heartbeat.
Mhm.
And so we did that and we were like looking at her phone. And I just remember looking up in this angle and I was like, okay, like she's like, well, we still see the sac. So the sac is still there. So it didn't come out, which was a
Mhm.
good sign, right? And then we just were like, and we saw like the little flutter of the heartbeat and
Mhm.
we were like, I just like started crying and she almost started crying and we were just like, oh my gosh, like it's, baby is still there. And it was
Mhm.
really early. It was like I was like 7, maybe on the cusp of like 8 weeks. So you normally don't see anything. But um so yeah, so that was a really like life-changing moment, I feel like, because I had never had any pregnancy complications, any bleeding really, anything like that. And then at that time too, because I literally went to the hospital then the next day, and that's when my grandma passed away. And I was still bleeding on and off, but she had prescribed me progesterone because she was like, you know what, I think you're bleeding because of your hormone imbalance. And even if you're not imbalanced, because we had to wait for the blood work, these, they're not going to hurt you.
Mhm.
But if you are, they're going to help you and they're going to stop the bleeding. And as soon as I started taking them, my bleeding stopped. So I was like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, amazing. Like, thank God that's what that was.
Mhm.
But that moment was very just life changing and like very telling of midwifery care.
Mhm.
And I was like, you know, I was already in midwifery school, but I was like, this is the midwife this is the type of midwife I want to be. Like, I want to walk with women through every obstacle and all their, struggles and journeys through the whole pregnancy and postpartum and everything. Um, and then so I got, I continued care with them, and we canceled the consult because we already met, we already did the things, and I was like, "Oh yeah, you're for sure hired, like definitely, no doubt about it." Um, and then um Isabel ended up retiring a month before I gave birth. And during my pregnancy, that was kind of hard because she's such a good midwife. And, but truly, I went to them for Shelly, who is also a great midwife. And I'm really close with Shelly now. But so fast forward, and there's a new midwife that took Isabel's place. And I was a little bit nervous because I know that we're just like very different people, but everyone had said great things about her. And her name is Corinne. She is a great midwife here in the Chicago suburbs. And so I met her, and I was like, well, I met them, and they were just very welcoming and warming, and I was like, "Okay, like, this is fine." But I did still have a little bit of, like, a pull from Isabel leaving because I had such a great bond with her already, like, we
Yeah.
had already been through some shit. And so I really trusted her, and then, so Corinne came in, and, I was just a little bit nervous because I'm very protective over my birth space, and I'm very sensitive. So I was just nervous about it, but they were so just such a great midwife, and a little bit more medical than like Isabel was, but I kind of understood it, and I didn't feel like threatened or anything because of the fact that I was in midwifery school, so I just knew already what to expect. Um, but so fast forward to my birth, and I was in connection with Shelly, and I really, like I said, I really wanted Shelly to be at my birth. Like, when I pictured my birth, I was like, Shelly is giving me hip squeezes, and she's like singing to me, and this is just the type of person that she is. If you know, you know. But so it was finally, I was laboring by myself with Mason from the time where everyone went to sleep till about 4 in the morning. And I was like, I want everyone to get sleep, like, I'm just laboring in the bathroom by myself. I want my doula, photographer, to get enough sleep, like, I was just so worried about everyone else. And it just so happens they were at another birth already. Like, they were literally home. So I should have just called them. But I didn't know that. So I texted Shelly, and I was like, I think things are picking up, and I think I need you here like ASAP, because I felt like it went from like 0 to 100 so quickly, like in the morning. And then I called her because she didn't answer her text. And I was like, if you don't answer my text in like 10 minutes, I know you're asleep, and then I'll call you. So I called her, and she had just fallen asleep from the birth before. And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And so that meant that she was home, and she was like an hour away, and Corinne was like 30 minutes away. So I was like, "Okay." And she's like, "I'll text Corinne, and Corinne will be over, and then I'll be on my way." And they must have gotten a call for another birth, like literally right after me, and that person was like 20 minutes away from Shelly. So that meant that Corinne was coming to my birth, and Shelly was going to her birth. And I didn't know that at the time. But as soon as I found out, I just remember like, okay, Isabel retired. Now Shelly's not at my birth. And I just felt so like lost for a second. And I was like, just like hurt. Like, this isn't the way that I pictured my birth.
Yeah.
But I just knew that if I was gonna sit in those feelings, that this birth was gonna go sideways because the pregnancy had already been kind of bumpy, and being pregnant and being in midwifery school was just not it, like, at all. I would not recommend, 0 out of 10. I had really, like, wonky blood pressure, like, all the things were just happening and trying, and it was just a very, different experience, so I was like, "You know what? I don't expect anything less from this birth, like, of course this would happen." So I decided to not sit in those feelings at that moment, and my birth just kept going, and I was like, "Okay, well, my labor." And then I think you arrived, like, not long after Corinne
Mhm.
came, and at that point, it was still so intense, and I was like, "You know what? I think I need to get in the tub." And I remember getting in the tub, and I think it was just a few moments where, because really I didn't have that many appointments with Corinne. They were mostly with Shelly after Isabel had left, and before
Mhm.
Isabel left, they were with Isabel. So
Yeah.
I knew Corinne, and I knew they were, like, warm and knowledgeable, so knowledgeable, oh my gosh, and educated and all the things. So I was like, I'm deciding to put my trust in them.
Mhm.
And it turned out great. Like, there were a few things where I was like, I don't want to be monitored right now. But like, I think that's everyone with a midwife, like, that goes by those protocols and like all the things, like, I'm sure they feel the same way. And that wasn't a huge deal to me at that time. Um, but now the bond that I have with Corinne is like, yeah, you're a badass midwife, like, thank you. Thank you for forcing me to get out the tub so that I could have the baby because my babies just like float in water, I guess. Like, so as soon as I got out of the tub, which she had suggested after like I dozed off a few times,
Mhm.
in the tub, I went to the shower and it felt like a boulder was coming through my body. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is why you made me get out the tub. And she's like, I just didn't want you to like lay there for another 3 hours because the
Mhm.
contractions were so intense. And this labor ended up only being 12 hours compared to my other labors, which were like 25 hours and 28 hours. So I cut them in half time wise. And I really just felt that. I had manifested, like, I was like, I want a 12-hour birth. Watch what you wish for because the intensity was like double.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so that whole birth was very moving, and I just remember you, like, snapping away pictures, like, a few times, and honestly, I don't even remember seeing you. I almost felt bad after the fact. It's so funny because I'm like, "I don't even know if I said hi to her." Like, you're just so emotional. I'm like,
Mhm.
"I don't even know if I said hi." Like, I don't know where I am, like, in my head while I'm laboring, like,
Yeah.
don't know, because it was so out of body. And then it's so funny because after the fact, you're like, "Hey, did you let the dog out?" Like like, you just see like, you go back to normal. It's so crazy. But Laborland with Mason was just that. It was literally out of body. And then I almost gave birth to him in the shower, which was crazy.
Mhm.
But I do remember, like, sitting on the toilet and I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna run, run for the tub." Like, I'm getting back in the tub and I'm gonna make it, and this baby's not gonna be born in the shower or the toilet or the floor. And and I remember I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna let myself have this last contraction," and I think I was on the toilet and I stood. I was like, "Every time I stand, I have a contraction." And I stood and I had another contraction, and I was like, and I just started running, and I remember Eric was like, "What the" ran behind me, and then I got to the tub, and you literally took a picture of this where I'm on the side of the tub and I just dropped to the floor,
Mhm.
and it was just, like, so dramatic. But I was like, "Oh," and, and I'm pushing because I'm already in fetal ejection, and, I'm on the floor, and I'm, like, feeling like, "Come on, don't be bored right here," and there was nothing under and it's white carpet. I was like, "Oh my gosh, there's no towels, there's nothing under me," and right after that, I jumped in the tub, and I made it to the tub, and I just remember, like, that was a marathon, and honestly, if we're being so for real, the bathroom and the tub were, like, 5 feet apart.
Mhm.
So, but that just felt, like, so long and so far away.
Mhm.
But as soon as I got back in the tub, I hydrated really quick, and Corinne was really great about, like, "Okay, drink water. Like, it's go time, but, like, drink water. We're
Mhm.
about to do this," like, we knew. We were like, "Okay.
Yeah.
Alright." We did that whole shower experience, and that was great. That sucked. But that really helped my body, the gravity, and then I remember telling Corinne too, like, "I'm really scared to push because of the whole Leo situation," like, I didn't want another cervical lift, like, "No, thank
Mhm.
you." Um, she's like, "Just follow." what you feel?" And I was like, "Well, I kind of feel pushy, but, like, I'm scared to push."
Mhm.
Um, and so they were just, kind of helping me through that a little bit. And I just remember Corinne being like, "You're crowning beautifully." And I was like, "Crowning?" I didn't even feel it because I was so, like, lost. Like, so much had just happened. Like, I just sprinted to the tub, like, barely made it. He's already crowning, like, holy moly. Um, but yeah, so then, I think I just pushed through that, and Corinne kind of guided me a little bit, and it was great. And then he came out and was fine. I did get a little nervous because he did sit in my his head was born, and he sat there for like a full minute. And normally after a minute they kind of have to help because baby's not turning, and that's kind of how like a shoulder dystocia situation can begin to happen. And she's like, "Okay, it's been a minute. Do you want me to help?" And I was like, "No." Like I just remember being like, "No." And Corinne like backed off, took off their gloves, and I was like, "Okay." Like, okay, they're gonna give me time to. And then as soon as I was thinking that, he just flew out. And I was like, "Okay, this is perfect." But in the video, I have a video of my birth. I was like, wow, like that is absolutely the midwife that I, want to be. Like being able to sit on your hands, but like still assess a possible situation.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I just felt like really respected in that moment. I think even after the fact. And then postpartum was great. Like I had no bleeding. I had a marginal placenta, which you had, which is
Mhm.
cool. And then they said that babies who have marginal placentas live on the edge. I don't know if you were there for that.
No,
And
I wasn't.
Corinne did like the placenta tour, and then so the cord was on the edge, and they were like, "Oh, babies who have placentas with the cord on the edge tend to live life more on the edge." And I was like, "Oh,
Mm.
it's cool." Um, but yeah, so that whole birth was great aside from the intensity, which was also like minimally traumatizing, but I think
Mhm.
I did that to myself. Like I manifested that. And that's my fault
Mhm.
for doing that to myself. Um, but yeah, so my second home birth, but my third baby, um, everything's been he is just such a happy boy.
Mhm.
Um, he breastfeeds and like smiles all day, and he's like the picture perfect baby for like having to be in midwifery school and having a newborn. Um, yeah,
I
but
love
that's
that.
yeah.
Um, your birth, I love hearing it from like your perspective because it's one where I was there.
Yeah.
So I like saw things differently than you did since you were in labor land and just like
Yeah.
out of body. Because yeah, when you went from like the shower to the pool, it was not even like a minute.
No, it was
But
like
to
10
you,
seconds.
yeah, and to you it probably felt like so long, like it took forever to get there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I always love hearing like the different perspective and how you felt during that time. So I really love your birth stories. They're awesome. Thank you for sharing them.
Yeah.
And then, so if anybody who is listening wants to find you on like social media or like just kind of connect with you, how can they do that?
So my biggest platform is Instagram. I never had a website up until literally 2, 3 months ago. When I opened my shop. But so on
Mhm.
Instagram, it's at Wise Woman Midwifery, and it's the same on Facebook. And then my shop is wisewomanco.myshopify.com. And I just sell, like birth worker merch and
Mhm.
mama merch and all that type of apparel. And then right now I do placenta encapsulation still. But yeah, most of the time my clients just contact me through Instagram or like
Mhm.
email, text. Sometimes I get a random call like, "Hey, are you Wise Woman?" Or like before I was like, "Hey, are you Crunchy and Sweet Mama?"
That's me. I love that. So yeah, if anybody wants to go and follow you, that's where they can find you. I'm going to put all of your links down in like the show notes and in the description of the video. That way they can easily just go over and find you. Well, thank you so much for being here, Jess.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Wow, weren't those stories just so amazing? The way that every single one was different, but also there were some similarities in all of her births. She is just a wonderful and great friend and a wonderful birth worker as well. So I highly recommend going and following her on all of her socials and just kind of connecting with her if you're local as well. Her placenta encapsulation business is amazing, and I love my keepsakes that I have from her too. So definitely check those out. But I also wanted to talk to you guys really quickly and let you know that I am actually hosting a free workshop that is called The Path to Your Empowered Home Birth. It will actually be tomorrow if you're listening to this on the day that it's released. So the workshop will be on the 30th of January, and I will go ahead and leave a link down in the description so that you can go and make sure you grab a seat in that free workshop that I'm hosting. And if you are listening to this maybe a few weeks later, this is a workshop that I'm going to have every once in a while. I am not sure yet how often I'm going to have it, but it will come back up. So if you are listening to this maybe like a few weeks after it's released or even a few months after it's released, still check out that link and see when the next one is going to be, because I will have a date posted for when the next one is going to be hosted live, and you can hopefully get a seat in that. Thank you so much for listening today. Don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and share with any of your friends. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you guys next time.